I thought my marriage was solid until I discovered my wife's secret plan to leave me. So, I made one move that turned her betrayal against her. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who doubted his wife. Emily and I had built 12 years of memories together, the kind of love story people envy. We had laughter, late-night talks, dreams, and a quiet understanding that felt unbreakable. But lately, the air in our home had shifted. It wasn't something obvious at first, just a silence that lingered too long, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had started guarding her phone like it held state secrets, keeping it face down on the table, the screen lighting up with messages she never mentioned. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe work was stressful or she was just tired. But then, one evening, I came home early from a business trip. I heard her voice coming from the living room, low, trembling, but not with affection. "No, not yet," she said softly, almost a whisper. I froze in the hallway, every nerve in my body tense. Her tone wasn't angry or upset. It was secretive, careful. My heart pounded as I stepped into view. She jumped slightly when she saw me. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice cracked halfway through. She smiled too quickly. "Oh, just a client from work," she said, but her hand fumbled to lock her phone. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But something in her eyes, a flicker of guilt or maybe fear, told me there was more to it. That night, I lay beside her, pretending to sleep while she faced away from me, scrolling on her phone under the dim light. The warmth between us felt like it had drained out of the room, leaving only suspicion and the haunting realization that maybe the woman I trusted most was slowly slipping away from me. The following days felt heavier than I could explain, like a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of our marriage. Emily had always been attentive, the kind of woman who noticed when I was tired or when my mood shifted, but now it was as if I'd become invisible. She stopped asking about my day, stopped laughing at my jokes, and when we did talk, her words were short, distracted, like her mind was always somewhere else. She was glued to her phone, and every time I walked into the room, she'd either lock it or flip it over. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, but one evening, while paying bills online, I noticed something that made my heart sink: several large withdrawals from our joint bank account. Thousands of dollars gone, and no record of where it went. I scrolled through the transactions again and again, hoping it was an error. It wasn't. My hands were shaking when I confronted her about it. "Hey, Em, did you transfer money out of the account?" She barely looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, yeah, I told you about that. It's for an investment." Her voice was calm, casual even, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. Emily never made big financial decisions without talking to me first. It was one of the things I loved about her. "What kind of investment?" I asked. She hesitated, then smiled, but it was forced. "Just something personal. Don't worry about it." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Don't worry about it. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in the living room staring at our wedding picture on the wall, wondering when exactly my wife stopped being honest with me, and when my home had started feeling like a stranger's house. I didn't want to believe my marriage was falling apart, but the signs were impossible to ignore. The secretive texts, the unexplained withdrawals, the way she'd avoid my eyes like she was hiding behind a curtain of guilt. It was eating away at me. Every time she smiled, I wondered if it was real. Every "I love you" felt rehearsed. I started doubting everything, even myself. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was the problem. But deep down, something told me this wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. One evening, I met my best friend, Mark, for a drink. He's known me for years and can read me like an open book. I tried to brush it off as stress, but he saw right through me. "You think she's leaving, don't you?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer at first, but the silence said enough. Mark leaned back, sighing. "Listen, man, I hope you're wrong. But if you're not, you've got to protect yourself. Move your assets. Make sure she can't drain you dry if this turns ugly." I felt sick hearing it. Protect myself? From my wife? It sounded so wrong, like betrayal before the betrayal. But the fear of losing everything, not just her, but the life we'd built, gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it. The next morning, I sat at my desk staring at my bank accounts, heart racing. With shaking hands, I quietly transferred my savings into a private account under my name. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mark. It wasn't about revenge, it was survival. I also started documenting things, screenshots, notes, dates, not because I wanted to catch her, but because I needed to know the truth. That day, I stopped being a husband blinded by love and started becoming a man preparing for heartbreak. A week later, Emily came home late again, the sound of her heels echoing through the hallway like a warning bell. It was past midnight, and the smell that followed her in wasn't her usual floral perfume. It was something stronger, expensive, and unfamiliar, mixed with the faint scent of wine. She looked surprised to see me still awake, sitting on the couch in the dim light. "Work dinner," she said quickly, slipping off her coat, her voice too casual, too rehearsed. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe her, but my chest felt tight, like something inside me was breaking in silence. I wanted to ask who she'd been with, where she'd really gone, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just said, "Did you have fun?" She smiled weakly, not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, it was fine." Then she disappeared into the bathroom, leaving me sitting there with my thoughts spiraling. That night, while she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how long she'd been lying to me, and how long I'd been pretending not to notice. The next day, while she was at work, I finally gave in to the gnawing doubt. I opened her old laptop, the one she'd stopped using months ago, claiming it was too slow. I didn't even know what I was looking for, maybe a sign that I was wrong. But what I found shattered whatever hope I had left. Buried deep in a forgotten folder were screenshots of messages between her and someone named David, a name I recognized instantly. He was our mutual friend, someone I trusted. The messages were flirtatious at first, then intimate, then cruelly clear. "I can't wait till it's official," he wrote. "He won't see it coming." My hands trembled as I read them. My wife, my best friend, my entire life, all conspiring behind my back. I felt something inside me die that moment, quietly and completely. The next morning, everything felt different, like the air in our house had turned colder overnight. I watched Emily pour her coffee, smiling as if nothing had happened, and I couldn't help but wonder how she could look so calm knowing what I now knew. Every movement she made felt rehearsed, every word too carefully chosen. I wanted to confront her, to throw those messages in her face, to ask her how long she and David had been laughing behind my back. But I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't want her to know I'd found out. So I did the only thing that made sense in that moment. I pretended. I smiled when she smiled. I kissed her cheek before she left for work, even though my heart screamed in protest. Inside, I was falling apart, but outside, I had to play the part of the oblivious husband. As soon as she was gone, I sat down and started documenting everything. The bank transfers, the messages, the dates of her late nights. I created a folder on my computer labeled tax documents, but it wasn't taxes I was keeping track of. It was betrayal. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger, but I needed it. I wasn't just protecting my money anymore. I was protecting what little dignity I had left. That evening, when she returned, she talked about her busy day at work while stirring pasta on the stove. I nodded along, barely hearing her, wondering if she realized the lies were piling up faster than the words leaving her mouth. I looked at her and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. And as painful as it was, I knew that the woman I once loved had already left me long before she ever packed her bags. She just hadn't said it out loud yet. 2 days later, Emily announced she'd be going on a business trip for the weekend, something about a client meeting out of town. Normally, I wouldn't have questioned it, but now every word out of her mouth felt like a blade wrapped in silk. I kept my face calm, forcing a small smile as I asked, "Which city?" She hesitated, just for a second, then said, "Chicago." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that if I hadn't already known the truth, I might have believed her. That night, after she fell asleep, I checked her email, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of pure desperation. And there it was, a hotel booking under her name, in a different city entirely. Not Chicago, Miami, for 2 people. My stomach twisted, and my vision blurred as I read it over and over, hoping somehow it would change. It didn't. The next morning, she packed her suitcase, kissed me on the cheek like she always did, and said she'd be back Sunday night. I forced a smile that felt like poison. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I called Mark. "She's lying," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "She's going away with him." Mark didn't say much, just sighed heavily. then you know what you have to do, man. Be smart. I spent that weekend in silence, pacing the house like a ghost. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it would be her confessing, apologizing, something. But the only messages I got were from my bank, notifications of withdrawals she was still making from our joint account. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window until the sun came up, realizing that the woman I once trusted more than anyone had turned my life into a carefully crafted lie. And I knew, deep down, there was no coming back from this. When Emily came back from her so-called business trip, she looked radiant, glowing, even like someone who had just returned from a romantic getaway rather than a work meeting. She walked through the door carrying shopping bags, her laughter light, her mood almost suspiciously cheerful. "You won't believe how great the conference was," she said, kissing me quickly before heading to the bedroom. I stood there, staring after her, feeling this cold emptiness spread through me. I could still smell the ocean on her clothes, that salty air mixed with expensive perfume. Miami. Not Chicago. Not even close. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could look me in the eye and lie so easily. But instead, I bit down my anger and asked softly, "Did you learn a lot at the conference?" She smiled, not catching the edge in my voice, and said, "Yeah, it was really productive." Then she turned away, humming, as if everything was fine. That night, while she showered, I checked her suitcase. It felt disgusting, intrusive, but necessary. Beneath neatly folded clothes, I found a small envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were 2 tickets to a beach resort in Miami, both dated for the weekend she'd been working. The other ticket? Booked under the name David. My stomach dropped. I sat there in silence, clutching the evidence that turned my worst fear into reality. When she came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, smiling like she hadn't just destroyed my world, I felt something inside me harden. I realized I couldn't confront her yet, not without a plan. Because now, this wasn't just heartbreak. It was war. I smiled back at her, hollow and steady, already deciding that when I made my move, she wouldn't see that coming either. As international investigators began pulling at the threads of Eric Voss's empire, a horrifying pattern started to surface. One that linked Ava Delaney's disappearance to something far bigger than anyone had imagined. Through encrypted bank transfers and offshore shell companies, they uncovered connections to a high-end human trafficking network disguised as a luxury escort agency that catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. Its victims were often influencers, models, or heiresses who vanished after attending secret events like the one Ava was invited to. The so-called E-network operated across multiple countries, laundering money through art auctions, private jet rentals, and elite investment firms. Each missing woman was coded as a project, and the payments were labeled under false product names. One of them read AD Project, a chilling abbreviation that matched Ava Delaney's initials. Investigators discovered flight logs from Eric's jet showing multiple trips to unregistered landing strips in the Middle East and Eastern Europe during the weeks after Ava vanished. Meanwhile, several employees from his company disappeared or were found dead under mysterious circumstances, their deaths written off as suicides. A hidden server seized in a raid revealed encrypted files containing photos of women posing in lavish rooms, each image tagged with dates and numbers. One of the images showed a diamond bracelet identical to Ava's lying on a marble counter. That was the moment investigators realized they weren't chasing a murder case. They were uncovering a global operation built on power, money, and fear. Every lead pointed back to men too rich and too connected to be touched. Even agencies from the US and Europe were warned to back off. For the first time, the Delaney family understood that Ava's fate wasn't just a crime. It was a cover-up at the highest levels. And in this world, justice had a price no one could afford to pay. The tension in our house became unbearable, like living inside a lie that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Emily started acting strangely cautious, almost as if she suspected that I knew something. Her tone softened, her smiles came more frequently, and she began making an effort, cooking my favorite meals, asking about my day, even suggesting we take a weekend trip together. It was almost comical, this sudden wave of affection after weeks of distance and deceit. But I played along. I had to. I couldn't let her know I was already 10 steps ahead. One evening, while we were eating dinner, She reached for my hand and said softly, "You've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay?" My throat tightened. The woman sitting across from me was the same one who had lied to my face, taken my money, and shared a hotel bed with another man. Yet she had the audacity to ask if I was okay. "Just work stress," I lied smoothly. She smiled, squeezing my hand, pretending to care. Inside, I felt disgusted, not just at her, but at myself for still being able to play this part so well. Later that night, when she fell asleep, I couldn't help but wonder what her endgame was. Did she plan to divorce me and take half of everything? Did she think I was too blind to notice? I stared at her sleeping face, and all I could see was betrayal wrapped in innocence. That was when I decided to stop being reactive and start being strategic. I began quietly closing joint accounts, redirecting my income, and consulting my lawyer about property laws. Every move I made was silent but calculated. She wanted to play games with my life. Fine. I'd play too, but I'd make sure she was the one who lost everything in the end. A few days later, Emily came home with a strange energy, nervous but excited, like she was on the edge of something big. I watched her from across the room as she poured herself a glass of wine, her hands trembling slightly. "You okay?" I asked, pretending not to notice the unease in her movements. She nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just a lot going on at work." I almost laughed. Work? The same excuse she always used when she was lying. But I kept my face calm, pretending to believe her. Over dinner, she started a conversation I'd been dreading. "So, I've been thinking," she began carefully, "maybe it's time we talk about us." My chest tightened, but I kept my tone even. "What about us?" She sighed, playing with her fork. "I just feel like things have changed. We've grown apart, and maybe we both need something different now." Her words were rehearsed, emotionless, like she was reading from a script she'd practiced in front of a mirror. I looked at her, studying every flicker of expression, every careful breath. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then nodded, eyes lowering in fake sadness. "I think it would be best for both of us." For a moment, I let silence stretch between us. I wanted her to think I was shocked, blindsided, maybe even broken. But inside, I was calm. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks. I simply said, "If that's what you want." Her eyes flickered with surprise. She hadn't expected it to be that easy. She wanted a fight, maybe guilt, maybe chaos. Instead, she got calm acceptance. She smiled faintly, relieved, and whispered, "Thank you for understanding." But as she looked away, I hid my own small smile. Because little did she know, the game she thought she controlled was already over. That night after she went to bed, I sat in the living room, the glow of the lamp flickering over our framed photos, smiling vacations, anniversary dinners, moments that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. My mind was racing, not with sadness anymore, but with clarity. She thought she was in control. She thought she could walk away clean, taking everything I'd worked for with her, while I sat here broken. But she didn't know that I had already moved my assets, transferred my savings, and secured my future before she even uttered the word divorce. The next morning, she brought it up again, more confidently this time. "I've already contacted a lawyer," she said over breakfast, stirring her coffee like it was any other day. "We can make this easy if we're both civil." I nodded, taking a sip of my own. "That's good," I said evenly. I wanted to be fair for both of us. The way her shoulders relaxed told me everything. She believed I was surrendering. She believed she had already won. That afternoon, I called my lawyer to finalize the paperwork, making sure every cent I had protected stayed untouched. My lawyer assured me everything was legally airtight. By the time Emily's lawyer reached out, she'd be walking into a wall she didn't see coming. When I came home that evening, she was on the phone, laughing softly, and though she tried to hide it, I caught the name David. I stood there for a moment, watching the woman I once loved giggle over plans with the man who had helped destroy my marriage. My heart didn't ache anymore. It just hardened. I smiled politely when she hung up, pretending not to have heard a thing, and quietly thought to myself, let her enjoy it while she still can. The following week felt strangely calm, like the eye of a storm before everything collapses. Emily moved around the house lighter, freer, as if she'd already detached from me emotionally. She started packing little by little, boxes labeled personal, drawers emptied quietly while she hummed to herself. Every item she took was another silent goodbye, but I didn't stop her. I just watched, pretending to be the supportive soon-to-be ex-husband. "I think I'll stay with my sister for a while after we sign the papers," she said one morning, not meeting my eyes. "Just until things settle." I nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable." She smiled, relieved, mistaking my calm for acceptance. What she didn't know was that I had already anticipated her every move. My lawyer had drawn up a complete financial disclosure, leaving out the accounts she didn't know existed. I wasn't going to cheat her, but I wasn't going to let her rob me either. The next day, she asked to meet to discuss logistics. We sat in the cafe where we'd had our first date. Irony at its cruelest. She spoke softly, rehearsed, using all the right phrases: mutual respect, peaceful separation, fresh start. I nodded through it all, barely listening. My mind was elsewhere, on the envelope in my bag, the one containing the prenuptial clause she had forgotten about, the one that protected my assets entirely if infidelity was proven. I didn't plan to use it at first, but after everything, it felt like justice. As we parted ways, she touched my hand gently and said, "I hope one day you'll forgive me." I forced a small smile, not because I forgave her, but because soon enough, she'd understand what true consequences looked like. And I wouldn't have to say a single word. 2 days later, Emily's lawyer contacted mine to move things forward. It was happening fast, just like she wanted. She was eager to close this chapter, probably imagining herself starting a new life with David, free and financially comfortable. I could almost picture them laughing about how easy it had been to fool me. But what she didn't know was that the documents she was about to sign were her undoing. When my lawyer called to review the settlement draft, he said, "She's agreed to the terms without question. She has no idea what's coming." I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. For once, I wasn't the one being blindsided. The day we met to sign, she arrived early, dressed perfectly, looking radiant, the picture of confidence. "I think it's best if we keep things simple," she said, her tone light, almost relieved. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. "I agree. Simple is best." We went through the paperwork quietly, the only sounds being the rustle of papers and the scratch of pens. When we finished, she smiled faintly and said, "I'm glad we could end this peacefully." I looked at her, at the woman I'd loved, trusted, and lost, and all I could think was how completely she'd underestimated me. Later that evening, I got a call from my lawyer. "It's done," he said. "She's legally signed everything. The prenuptial clause is in effect. She gets nothing from the shared assets you moved." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not from guilt, from relief. After weeks of torment, sleepless nights, and betrayal, I had finally reclaimed my power. That night, Emily texted me, "I hope you find happiness, truly." I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off my phone. She'd already taken enough of my peace. I wasn't about to let her take my closure too. 2 days later, Emily's lawyer contacted mine to move things forward. It was happening fast, just like she wanted. She was eager to close this chapter, probably imagining herself starting a new life with David, Fr. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in months: calm. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but it wasn't heavy anymore. For the first time, silence didn't feel like suffocation. It felt like peace. Emily had officially moved out the night before, leaving behind only a few forgotten items: a scarf on the couch, a mug in the sink, a half-empty bottle of her perfume that still lingered faintly in the air. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around at what used to be our space, and realized it was mine again. Not because I'd won some cruel game, but because I had survived it. The pain was still there, sharp and raw, but beneath it was a quiet strength I hadn't recognized before. Around noon, my lawyer called again to confirm that everything had been finalized. "It's official," he said. "The assets are secured. You're free." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Free. It didn't mean happiness. Not yet. But it meant I could finally start breathing without fear, without lies shadowing every corner of my life. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. There were pictures of us smiling on vacations, at dinners, at parties. Moments that once felt real, but now seemed like snapshots from someone else's story. I deleted them one by one, not out of anger, but acceptance. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. Later, I poured myself a drink, stepped out onto the balcony, and watched the city lights flicker below. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel bitterness, just quiet gratitude. She had betrayed me, yes, but in doing so, she had also set me free. A week passed, and life slowly started to feel normal again, though normal had a new meaning now. The routines that once revolved around Emily felt strange at first, making coffee for one, sleeping on just one side of the bed, eating dinner in silence. But little by little, that silence started to feel comforting instead of lonely. I began going to the gym again, catching up with old friends, rediscovering pieces of myself I'd forgotten while trying to keep a crumbling marriage alive. One evening, Mark came over with a bottle of whiskey. He sat down beside me, giving me that knowing look only a lifelong friend can give. "You did the right thing, man," he said quietly. "I know it hurts, but you saved yourself." I nodded, staring into my glass. "It doesn't feel like a victory, though," I admitted. "It just feels empty." Mark leaned back, sighing. "That's because you're still healing. But trust me, one day you'll wake up and realize you don't miss her. You miss the person you thought she was." His words hit deep because he was right. I wasn't mourning Emily anymore. I was mourning the illusion of who I believed she was. That night, after he left, I sat outside again, the air crisp and still. I realized that everything I'd gone through, the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak, had stripped me down to nothing but the truth. And maybe that was what I needed. Before heading to bed, I caught a glimpse of our old wedding photo still sitting on the shelf. For a moment, I considered throwing it away, but instead, I placed it face down. Not out of hate, but closure. The past didn't need to be destroyed, it just needed to stay where it belonged. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from Emily. My heart skipped for a second when I saw her name in the inbox. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Her message was short, polite, almost formal. She said she hoped I was doing well, that she'd been thinking about how things ended, and that she wanted to meet for closure. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to ignore her completely, but another part of me, the part that still needed answers, couldn't let it go. After a few hours of debating, I replied with a simple "okay." We met at a small coffee shop downtown, the same one we used to go to on Sunday mornings. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Not happier, not sadder, just lost. Her smile was hesitant as she sat across from me. "You look good," she said softly. I nodded. "You too." There was an awkward pause before she finally spoke. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you until it was too late." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I once loved, but it didn't hit the same. I'd already moved past the version of me that needed her apology. I sipped my coffee and said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily." She looked at me with tears in her eyes, as if realizing I meant it. There was no anger left, no desire for revenge, just peace. When she left, I sat there for a while, watching her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time, I didn't feel pain or regret, only relief. The chapter had truly closed. After that meeting, something in me finally settled. It was like a storm that had been raging inside me for months had finally passed, leaving behind a strange calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I just was. Life moved on quietly. I threw myself into work, started focusing on projects I'd neglected, and even began enjoying the little things again. Morning runs, late-night movies, the smell of coffee filling the house in the morning. One evening, while I was out with Mark, he mentioned something I didn't expect. "You know, Emily and David didn't last," he said, watching my reaction. I looked up slowly. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "He left her. Apparently things got messy. Guess karma came around." For a second, I didn't know how to react. Part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Mostly, I just felt indifferent. The man who once would have broken down at the mention of her name now just nodded and said, "Figures." Mark smiled faintly. "You really have changed, man." And he was right. That night, when I got home, I sat by the window again, staring at the city lights, and thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the heartbreak, the pain, they'd once consumed me. But now, they felt distant, like memories belonging to someone else. I wasn't the man who doubted his worth anymore. I wasn't the man waiting for an apology or a reason. I was free, not because she was gone, but because I had finally let go. I poured myself a drink, raised it to the quiet night, and whispered, "Here's to starting over." And for the first time in what felt like forever, the toast didn't taste bitter. It tasted like peace. Months passed, and life slowly started to bloom again. The pain that once haunted every corner of my mind had turned into a faint scar, still there, but no longer hurting. I moved to a new apartment across town, smaller but brighter, filled with sunlight and the sound of the city below. It felt like a fresh page, untouched and waiting to be written on. I bought new furniture, painted the walls, and left behind everything that reminded me of the old life I had shared with Emily. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One weekend, I ran into someone unexpected, a woman named Claire. We met at a bookstore, both reaching for the same novel, and ended up laughing at the coincidence. There was something gentle about her, something unpretentious that immediately put me at ease. We started talking, first casually, then more often. She wasn't like Emily. There were no games, no hidden motives, just simple honesty. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to perform or protect myself. I could just be me. One evening, as we walked by the river, Claire looked at me and said, "You have this calm about you, like you've been through a storm and finally found land." I smiled faintly. "Something like that," I replied. It wasn't love yet, not even close, but it was something real, something steady. And that was enough. As I watched the sunset reflect off the water, I realized that healing doesn't come all at once. It comes quietly, through small moments that remind you that life still has beauty, even after it's broken you. And in that moment, with the world peaceful around me, I finally felt ready to live again. As time went on, Claire and I grew closer, not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through quiet, consistent care. She became the calm presence I didn't know I needed, someone who didn't ask about my past unless I offered it, someone who made me laugh again without forcing me to forget. We'd spend evenings cooking together, arguing playfully over recipes, or sitting in silence with a movie playing, comfortable in the stillness. It was so different from what I had before. No tension, no hidden agendas, no walking on eggshells. For the first time, love felt peaceful. One night, while we were sitting on the balcony, she asked softly, "Do you ever think about her?" I paused, looking at the stars before answering. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but not the way I used to. It's like thinking about someone from another lifetime." She nodded, her hand finding mine, and that simple touch said more than words ever could. Healing hadn't been about replacing Emily. It had been about rebuilding myself from the ground up, learning to trust again, not just others, but my own heart. There were still days when memories surfaced, moments that stung unexpectedly, but instead of breaking me, they reminded me how far I'd come. Claire once told me, "The right person won't heal you. They'll remind you that you can heal yourself." And she was right. Sitting there under the night sky, her head resting on my shoulder, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they had shaped me, but they no longer defined me. What defined me now was peace, growth, and the quiet, steady promise of something new. And for the first time in years, that promise felt real.